actually. Dan Doty, it's sort of strange the way we met, and I. This is like the big picture for me is just it's just like the wonder of the world, which is that like a Facebook friend of mine who's also named Dan posted a podcast episode he did with you. That was Dan McCombie, and I went on your Melt weekend, the men's emotional leadership training, which was absolutely amazing. And then like my dad decides to go on the open source weekend with you. And then like during that conversation, my brother finds out that the thing we've been talking about is done by his friend Dan Doty, who he's known for years. And it's just like everyone's jaws are like just dropped to the floor. Cause like, I don't know. It's just, I have nothing else to say, but like here we are today in this room, and it's just sort of fantastic and odd.
It is weird. I mean, Matthew, your brother is literally one of my closest friends that I've ever had in my entire life. It is weird.
It is very, very weird because my brother and I have had a long history, and I wouldn't say I know him nearly as well as you do, obviously.
Yeah.
So, can you explain a little bit about, like, when you go to a party, when somebody says, well, what do you do, Dan? What do you tell people you do?
That's so good. I finally got it down to a simple thing. I say that I help men learn to be more vulnerable as they live their life with their loved ones and their family members and their coworkers. I help men open up and connect to themselves and connect to other people in simple human ways. I help men be human in the sense of having simple human connection.
Yeah. And that's surprisingly not an easy thing for a lot of guys. It's a need. Like it's a real need that men have.
I mean, in my opinion, it's a massive underserved need that is making immense impact on our world, I believe.
Well, yeah, so I agree with you. I mean, I really enjoyed the men's emotional leadership training weekend. And a couple of my friends definitely were like, okay, so what's the deal? Like, why isn't this bullshit? Like, why do men need this? Men are the oppressors. Men are you've got the patriarchy going for you. Like, why do you need this? And I have my own answer why it's important for me. Like, I'm guessing this gets said to you from time to time.
It is from time to time, but honestly, not very often, man. Like very, very rarely does anybody like question me as to why we're doing what we're doing. Like very rarely. I'd say 1 out of 1,000 clicks, really. But so here's my answer to that is that story that men have it, as well as they could because they're in charge and they have the patriarchy isn't the full picture. And I don't think it's even that accurate of a viewpoint.
Yeah.
I think the system is a much larger system that includes the participation of many more people.
Yeah.
And like I mean, that's easy to pick out just the power dynamic and just say, yeah, there's that. But that's like a strangely not very curious standpoint. When you actually go to these men, they're hurting. They're not doing great, man. Like look at our society. Look at the reality of our families and our workplaces. And like, do you think? And it all comes down to me. It's like if you're doing good, you generally don't hurt and oppress other people.
Yeah, that's
what I say.
No, and it's interesting because I was listening to NPR the other day, and there was a lady on who I found it eye-opening because she was like, this narrative that somehow we should fire all the men and hire all the women. She's like, that's a pretty dangerous narrative. And I think she was like, I don't want that pressure either. That's not a fix. And I think sometimes that's like an easy narrative. I don't know if you got a chance to look at that Alan Watts segment I sent to you.
I loved it.
Yeah, like he talks about the all-man man and the all-woman have no relationship, and that we're all a spectrum.
Yeah.
How did that resonate with you? I'm curious.
I mean, It resonates perfectly. I mean, when I first started really getting serious about Everyman and doing this, the phrase that rang in my ears and in my head more than anything was full spectrum masculinity. And
Yeah.
I actually try not to use the word masculinity in my work. I actually don't think it's very helpful. I think it's very it's hard to not have a clear image in your head what that means. And my belief is that when men hear the word masculine or masculinity, most often there's gonna be a natural tendency to be, I have to do that, I have to be that. There's gonna be a pull toward that, right? So, but yeah, this idea of full spectrum humanity, the idea of the experiences that we can have while alive on this planet are wide and wild. And so, yes, I do believe that, any man, woman, any way that you're alive on this planet, like, I think it's good for us to expand and be able to feel, and to make it practical, to make it just practical. Like in my work life, it helps to have the tools of being very focused and dedicated and kind of an ass kicker. But dude, when I go downstairs to play with my son or to be there for my wife, basically at any time in most moments, I need to be able to have the skills off and to listen, to be compassionate, and to connect. And to me, it's all about slowing down and connecting. So
this is like on the emotional range you need is more than just like kicking ass and taking names.
Yeah.
And so there's two things in there. One, I definitely I want you to talk about your journey, about how you got into men's work and how you decided to start what you started and how you're growing what it is. So maybe we can take a step back and say like, okay, how did you first get introduced to this stuff?
So I was 27 or 28. I was living in the Bronx. I was a teacher, a high school teacher in the Bronx. And I had no tools as an adult man. I was overstressed and overworked and basically had 27 years of repressed junk inside of me. And I blew my life up. I had kind of a meltdown and quit my job and blew up my relationship. And I had to, it just sent me on a course of deep reflection, introspection. And I, kind of, sometimes things happen in this naturalistic fashion. I got invited to my first men's group then, and I found it. And it just immediately, it was this entirely new thing that I didn't know was possible. And
what about the invitation made you want to come? Like,
do you have,
because like a blown up guy, like somebody sends you a lifeline. I don't know what made you want to like take that road.
Gosh, that's a great question. It's that funny itch that I get when something feels right. That intuitive itch that's just like, yeah, you gotta do this. And I think I was desperate. It was desperation too. Seriously. But anyway, so that started I'll back up very briefly, but after college, I spent about 5 years leading wilderness therapy trips. I was a wilderness guide that worked with small groups of young men who were hurting and in trouble. And at this point in my life, I went to this first men's group and I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to facilitate this for others forever, but never once did I do it for myself. And it was like, this huge, like, come on, man, you need support too. And so, I joined a group and I ended up moving west out to Montana. I found another group immediately, this very random way, which was led by my friend and mentor, Owen Marcus, who is one of the founders and partners of Everyman. And he has really, for 40 years, developed this sort of system of protocols, and the simplicity of the emotional work that we use at Everyman is his life, right? It's his life's work. And he and we just clicked in a giant, deep way immediately. And then, I kept living my life, and I had a whole new other career in the middle there, but I just knew, I mean, I've known for a long time, even when I was working in the wilderness with kids, I knew that my job in life was to work with guys. Like it's just a gift that I have, or for whatever reason, that's what I'm best at, whether it's talking to them or coaching them or guiding them or leading them or whatever. That's just where I'm supposed to be. So I had so my in-between career, I got a career in media. I was a producer, director, and executive producer of TV and film and things. And that whole time there was this like feeling inside of me that was like, ugh, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be. I'm not doing my thing. I'm not doing this stuff with men. And it was hard. But I was also very, very, very afraid to step up and be the guy to say what I'm saying now. Like, like we just got to slow down. We got to learn to be vulnerable. We have feelings too. And it was scary, man. It was like, it felt at that time like the scariest thing in the world to be vocal about that.
Yeah.
So, but then my son was born, and that was like a giant kick. It's like, okay, man, you got a boy growing up in this world. Like, if you don't do your thing, you are not like being a dad felt more than just for him. It felt like I have to try to impact the world for him,
Yeah.
And then I got fired. So it was like, all right, let's do this.
That made it easy.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
It's interesting, this idea of like doing it for your son and wanting to live up to your own principles. I think that's a pretty powerful call.
And now I'm about to have a second son, so
Oh, congratulations, man! That's insane.
Fate is serving me up a cocktail,
a hot, delicious bowl of broth.
But it's I feel doomed and destined to just hang out with dudes for most of my life, which I got to be honest is a little bit of a bummer. I mean, I love it, but everywhere I look, there's men.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. I mean, this is one of the meaty thing we wanted to talk about, which is shifting the cultural conversation around men. So the question is like, where do you see it now, and where do you think we can take it to?
Yeah.
And how are we shifting? Like, if we don't do anything, where's it going to go? And where do we want to swerve it to?
So this is interesting, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. But here's my feelings that, I'm 36. A lot of the guys we work with are, I would say, 26 and up, right? Like the top level of millennials, and then next up to whoever's there. I actually think that the cultural conversation is very different depending on what age of person who's having the conversation. I've been working, I actually just went in and volunteered at a local high school this last week and did a little men's group with them. And I mean, I left feeling a lot of, like, I was really kind of blown away and surprised, but I'm kind of like, oh, yeah, these guys, they don't really need a men's group.
The kids are all right. That's amazing.
They're kind of on top of it, man. I think like the millennials and lower are very, very much more open to this whole human spectrum that we're talking about than
there's so much more gender fluidity in the kids. It's like it's natural and normal to them.
Yeah, I'm guessing that the boys and men will probably be benefited by support, but it may just look different. It may be a different conversation to have with them. But so let's say dominant culture, well, I don't know if that's fair, but big culture, big picture, I feel that there's, I don't know, I can almost see a 15 to 25% of the population that's like very, like Brene Brown talks about. She thinks there's this kind of silent majority of people that are into compassion and into vulnerability and kind of operate this way. And it might be bigger than we know.
Yeah.
But there still is, it's a tough shell to crack, which is the tougher, faster, stronger, harder, more powerful, right? It's still real, still very real, but it seems fragile, I would say. In my opinion.
It's funny. This weekend I was watching a documentary on HBO about Elvis, and he would go to church on Sundays, and even in white churches at the time in the South, they would sing and they would shout and they would quake and they would have these out of body experiences, and then the rest of the week just be totally tight and buttoned up and I don't know. That seems weird to me. That you just sort of shove it all into this one day, and the whole rest of the time you're not shaking your hips, you're not filled with joy, you're not connected to your body. Like, that seems so. There's I just wonder about when we can be 100% integrated all the time.
Great question. Yeah. I think that's a lofty goal.
Yeah.
On an individual level, I mean, yeah, it's very, because yeah, I think the texture of the different parts of our lives definitely at least seem to call for different actions on our parts,
Yeah.
like generally speaking, we go to work and there's a code or there's a culture. So yeah, I don't know. I'd like to shake my hips all week. I certainly don't.
Well, so here's the thing, and it's interesting, and I'm going to segue to this because I drew when I went to the men's emotional leadership training. I went because, and the people who are listening to my podcast with this conversation are like, wait, why are we talking about men's stuff? Like we talk about group decision making and facilitation. And for me, I was like, okay, I want to see how a totally different universe does facilitation. Plus, I value connecting to my masculine core, I guess I might say. And because I don't go to a regular men's week, there's a set of rituals and structures in the Everyman group where there's like a first round check-in, a second round check-in, and then there's a journey that may or may not happen. You guys actually have a pretty structured approach. There's a set of rituals that structures the conversation each week. If a man goes to a weekly group, he's gonna unpack certain things on a regular basis. He's going to show up in a certain way. And it really kind of blew my mind that I was like, oh, this is structured dialogue. This is how like agile groups facilitate like stand-ups and check-ins. There's not like it's not a universe apart. It's like the other side of a coin in a way.
Sure.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like how the ritual, like what's the Sunday to get guys to like unhook a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest and most important part of it is just our explicit. We're just very explicit about what we're there to do.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so we have a structure. We have a simple frame for it, and that just helps to allow it helps people to relax and let go. Because, you kind of know what's going on. The front of your mind doesn't have to be, wait, what's happening? Where we go? And like everything's just kind of set and easy. But back to the explicit nature part is that we come together and we just outright say it. Like we are going to operate from a different place than we do in our normal life. We're going to we have 3 steps and they're so simple. We're going to slow down. We're going to feel, right? We're willing and ready to feel. And that's not just emotions. It is emotions. It's your body. It's truth, right? We're willing to get in touch with what is real for us, right?
And if I can just say, like, when I saw the way the guys checked in, like I remember this one guy who's like, I feel the sun on the right side of my face. Mm-hmm. It was the most like, I was like, wow, he is right here in the moment. Yeah. And he's just like, okay, this is what I'm feeling right now. My shoulders are tight. I feel the sun on the right side of my face. I'm excited. I'm here and I'm in. And like seeing how somebody structured a check-in. And in my work, that's a little, I do try to get people into the room, but it's getting people into their bodies. It's not something that sort of mainstream culture, people are becoming more comfortable with it, but I love how you guys, everything is somatic. It's like, here we are. Yeah. The left side of my face is hot.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you pointed that out because it is so true. And in some sense, it is very simple. I mean, what we're talking about is basic mindfulness in a sense, right? In a shared dynamic relational setting, right? And we're not the only ones doing this. There's like the circling, there's all kinds of, people have done this for ages and ages. Yeah. But what it does, and especially, in the context of men and the way we do it is like what we're doing is like the most beautiful setup, right? It's like, we're going to come together. We're going to slow down. We're going to become very mindful of what's true for us. And we're going to have explicitly stated that in this space, that is the entire intention of what we're doing, is to share that with each other. Yeah. And that setup is really all it takes, because then this really beautiful human flow happens that and it's like making art in a sense. It's like this amazing group art that's made, and it's I mean, you know, we could make it more complex. We could talk about what's happening exactly, but the reality is that kind of gets in the way. And so with this simple structure and the simple protocols, that really what we're going for is human connection. And through that human connection, it comes like the potential to heal, the potential to be creative, the potential to shine light on the, you know, the confusing question marks we all have. And it's just, I'm getting fired up just talking about it. It's so powerful and real, you know?
And so the question I would ask myself, the world, is like, so the guys in my group from the Melt weekend, we are having a long email chain, which is like on Google's, like, you know, when there's like those indents, it's getting thinner and thinner at the bottom. It's actually kind of annoying. I feel like we should start a new chain. And I've had a couple of guys who are like, hey, can I just check in with you? And we sit down over the phone and we talk about something. And I'm like, it feels a little weird because, you know, I'll call my mom and just talk for an hour about like anything and everything. I'm like, but I don't know why guys don't do this. It's just something we haven't been taught or trained to do, where I'm like, okay, so yeah, let's talk about this issue you're having and then a bunch of other stuff. And we have no place else to go for 30 minutes. And like, we're just going to focus on this one thing. I feel like I have a lot of, you know, close male friends, but we don't like call each other up just to like check in on like something.
Right.
And that's like crazy.
It is crazy, and it is the overwhelmingly dominant dynamic between males and their friends, especially as we get older.
Yeah.
It's just like straight up how it is. And so, and here's like my intention and where I have a lot of hope for what we're doing is that if we can get over that hump, which once you've done it, it's really easily seen as a very beneficial thing, right? Oh man, we can like, you know, I mean, I seek out professional help all the time, right? So therapists and body workers and I mean, you name it and I'll do it. And I do it.
Yeah.
But the amount of like benefit we can simply give to each other as like human being to human being with the intention to just show up and really listen and really just stay present with each other. It is, I mean, you know, I'm sure you can probably imagine it, like that weekend that you did, it really deeply can affect people in a deep way. And then the ongoing thing where you just sort of normalize this in your life, dude, people that for decades wanted to start a business, but were terrified. They do it in a snap. People who, you know, their relationship has been hurting in a certain way. Like, it's just like this little shakeup. It's like, okay, they're going to do what they need to do to take action on it. It's crazy.
It is crazy. It's funny. One of the guys in my group, I asked him if I could, I don't know if it was a withhold, but I was like, look, man, I gotta just like unload on you. And I'm like, you told us on day one, this shit you had to take care of. And we had to literally just take you through this whole journey for you to admit this thing that you knew you needed to do. I'm like, come on. And he's like, oh man, you're right. And then it turned out his wife felt the exact same way when he got home, which is hilarious.
Well, no.
I prepared him for this conversation.
Yeah. So I love talking about conversations, right? So like we have lots of conversations, and so here's where I go with what you just said. So this man, he already knew it. He knew it logically. He knew it mentally, right?
Yes. But
there is this sort of like I talk about. And this isn't scientifically based, but I feel like our minds run on a digital scale and our bodies and hearts are like an analog, like speed, right? If we're not roped together, like the impact of the emotions, the impact of like the deeper intuitive, whatever it is, like when that gets fired up to connect with the mind and what you know, then it just seems like far easier to do the heavy lifting we need to do, right?
Yeah.
So the conversational thing, what we're doing at Everyman is like we're attuning ourselves to notice when we're just being logical and knowing, and we're dropping down into the feeling, and so and again, that's so our conversations. and this might not, be accurate or anything, but it does. It feels like it drops it down a few levels. And then from those levels, it's just a different animal.
No, it is. You can hear basically when you're talking from like here, and you're like, I think this, like, and I'm wondering that, or I feel a little something. And Owen, who led my group, said this a lot. He's like, no, you don't feel a little this, you feel this.
Yeah.
Like, just say what you actually feel. And it's non-trivial. It's a group agreement. The group creates that space where it's possible. And I think part of it is like the invitation into the space where you're like, this is what's going to happen here. We're only going to be real. We're only going to be 100% present. And it starts with the check-in that is a no bullshit check-in, right? Where you just like, here I am in the very present moment, and this is what's happening. And just as a sidebar, what's sort of blowing my mind is that, my dad, who's been in spiritual work for, my entire life, actually was willing to go to this thing, had a really, really transformative experience. My mother, I don't know if maybe Matt told you this, but like my mother called me in tears the day he got home. And she's like, you saved your father's life. Like, he can't talk about it yet because but I can feel his substance is different. And she's like, I don't think you went on the men's weekend for you. You went for your father, which was like really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I hope that he goes to a men's group, because the thing I've been thinking about a lot which is about how change happens. And, I teach workshops, and there's there's a joke in adult learning that people forget 80% of what they learn the second they leave the room. I actually brought this up in a workshop I was doing. I was like, hey, everybody, it's day 3 of this amazing transformational experience. Everyone's high-fiving everyone else. So guess what? You're going to forget 80% of everything in about 2 hours when you leave here. And everyone's like, oh, you're bringing things down. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk around, and everyone's going to take like your own notes about what's on the wall. And that's going to be like your last chance to get it from, to only forget 75% or 60%. And I think what you guys do is like, people have to be in a group at some point. Like doing this on a weekly basis is really the way to make it happen, I guess.
It really is. And so, I want to add, so we're about to launch really an online community element to what we're doing too, in which we're going to do a weekly sort of practice guide of how to practice this in your life and how to practice this stuff in your group. So that's a bigger conversation that we're about to have, but I want to, just so I don't skip over it. So I just want to, that having father there was incredible. And that retreat, my father was there too.
Yeah, I heard.
So I don't want to like, in terms of conversations, probably the single conversation I'm most proud of in my entire life is the podcast I just did with my father post-retreat. And I think like, I love doing my podcast and we have good conversations, but I have a new goal to bring the baseline of my show to the depth in terms of conversations, my dad was the hardest guy to ever talk to in my entire life. And everything is different. Everything has changed now. Everything. Anyway, we don't have to harp on that, but it's a big thing because, my dad also was like, hey, I was going to send you and your brother an email about this, but since you're here, I might as well tell you, like, I really love you and I'm proud of you. And, he said this stuff before, but there was a different intention behind it. One of the thing that I've put in the middle of the conversation OS that I've been building for myself is invitation. Everything is like the invitation is the intention. It's like, why are you saying it? What are you bringing somebody into? Yeah. And it was a very different intention. And actually what I was able to say back to him, I was like, hey, so I want you to exercise so you don't die because I want you to be around longer. Yeah.
Like, that's why I bother you about this stuff. And he was like, I can hear you. He heard that in a different way too.
Yeah.
And that's talking just like at a different level.
Yeah.
Which is the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we talk about, I want to see that map you created again.
Oh.
Can we go to that?
We can go to that. This is how we go to that.
awesome, because I have it all bouncing in my head. Yeah.
Okay. I love that this actually resonated with you slightly. What quadrant, what's the most important thing for you to work on in this map of like which conversation, like is it the self, the team, you as a coach or your community?
So the ones on my left, as I look at them, the coach and the self, I feel I have a very strong place with right now. The community one is big, but honestly, the biggest, more so, I have a vision for how to speak with the community. It's more about getting it all together and actually moving on it and making it real. So the team conversation at this point is the one that needs more help than anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so like Aaron and Owen, and I'm blanking out on the other guy's name.
So Lucas, Sasha, Sasha, Owen, and myself are the partners, and Owen is our, basically our first hire and our main point man on events and community. So,
and when you say, it's like, because when I look at team, I drew this little loop from the people from Melt, because it's like there's people who basically are running men's groups all over the country, and they're just doing it because they want to do it, and they're helping scale the community really powerfully for you, which is like good trick, nicely done. Like from a community manager's perspective, I'm like, you need people who are willing to give their time and energy to help scale something.
Well, let's talk about that. That is the core of how we envision Everyman as a large community. That is the, it's the, to use a overused metaphor, it's the teaching men to fish rather than selling them fish, right? That is truly what we're all about. And we think that first of all differentiates us from a lot of growth communities. Yeah. But also it's the only way we can really do this at the scale that we're talking about, right? Like, which is like a billion men. Yeah.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah. I don't have any real desire or need to be, a guru. Like I want to write and I want to speak and I want to get this word out. But at the end of the day, we're trying to build a machine of humans that and again, what we're sharing is simple. It is the slow down, feel, and connect with each other. So our biggest struggles right now are just that we have big ambitions and there's a lot of legwork to get things in place. And we're a very small team with very few resources, and we're just it's just that we're a startup, right?
Yeah, you're a startup.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, so here's the thing that's sort of funny. Like, I struggle with this online component as well, because I think one of the things that I'm realizing now is that the interface for the conversation, if you change the interface, you change the conversation. And I'm working on a webinar for this week, and I found a friend of mine was watching Key and Peele have this hilarious text message misunderstanding. Like it just keeps escalating to where like they're going to have a street fight about something, and it's completely one-sided. And as soon as they get into the same space, it breaks. And it's a joke, but it's like, this is the reality. Texting is this narrow pipe. It doesn't allow for any nuance of communication. Right. I've been trying to build a Slack community. Slack is great for some people. It's not for others. Like, how do you think I'm uncomfortable or I don't know how to manage the interface of digital as well. Like a digital conversation is much, much harder. Like, how are you guys going to make it as connected and authentic?
The short answer is that we're going to hire somebody who really knows how to do that. That's the short answer. But here's a slightly more broad but hopeful answer too, is that I do think that if we can stick to our basics and stick to our basic protocols, and so say we have a ideally giant private Facebook page, right, for all of our members that are doing work. Like, we'll just be super clear with maybe we'll pin a post at the top that says the point, the intention, the guidelines, right? And that the other thing that we do really well in our groups is that we empower all members to own and care for the collective, right? Yeah. Like, so it's not up to me to call somebody out and say, hey, that's not what we're here for. It's like everybody is expected to not only like adhere to the agreements, but stand up for them. You know?
Yeah. And you guys make that pretty,
yeah.
you guys try to make those agreements pretty clear on the weekends. Like, you're here to take care of yourself and other people. Like, and that's core. Yeah. It's so I want to make sure we talk about your TED Talk, because we only have a couple of TEDx, right? We're not allowed to say
TEDx. Right.
Keep getting reminded. Somebody off to the side is like, it's X, right? Okay. Tell me about that journey, because writing and performing one of those is not a trivial thing. That's a big conversation starter. That's a huge invitation to bring people together, you know, and sounds like it's a start of like a new clarifying moment for you, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely clarifying. I mean, at this moment in time, what I feel is the larger cultural conversation that I hope to invite people into, you know?
Yeah.
And so the title of the talk was What the World Needs from Men. And the process of doing it was actually really fun and really stressful. And, you know, I had an original talk that I wrote, and I thought it was pretty good, and got some feedback, and it wasn't that good. But I had some amazing coaching, which was so fun and so helpful, and really helped me, you know, do this exact thing, clarify what the core message is. And the core message is that, you know, we are watching men hurt each other and hurt themselves in our culture. And the core belief that I hold and we hold is that men are repressing a lot of stuff, and they're not connected with other people in the deep way that creates safety, right? So they're disconnected from themselves, disconnected from others. That's kind of point number 2. Point number 3 is that we can do this together. We can just take the time and learn the simple skills to practice being vulnerable and compassionate, and a men's group is a good place to do that, right? Yeah. And then, so the call to action really is that, I mean, the thing that framed the whole thing, my intro, is that, I hope they don't yell at me for talking about this, but they like to yell at you for stuff. They really do. But
you're not allowed to talk about the talk yet?
I don't know. But the frame is that, you know, since what I envision as early human history, men have been protecting their tribes, protecting their families in various ways, right? And today, how I believe we need to step up to protect our families and tribes is this internal honesty, right? Yeah. And get rid of the repression and get rid of the isolation that we have, because that to me is the logical chain of what's happening. You know,
it's interesting because like most guys are focused on team and like work, and they forget about self-care 100%. And don't give themselves the green spaces or the meditation or the whatever they need. And it's interesting that's something, it sounds like you really do have you have coaches, and then you take their advice. And then you take time for yourself to find out what's important for your core. And I think it just seems like other guys just need to just take care of themselves. Like literally just take care of themselves.
It's a big part of it. It's a really big part of it. I think that, for me, it started really young. I had a series of very fortunate mentorships in my life that, I wasn't explicitly looking for, but just things like my first taekwondo instructor when I was really young, my boss in high school, one of my college professors, just like, and these guys didn't ever explicitly say, hey, Dan, you got to do things this way. But they were just, somehow I had the wherewithal to absorb a major lesson from each of them, And I think that was one of my big things in my meltdown in my late 20s was like, whoa, there is no way I'm going to handle this on my own. Like the idea, the whole the myth of the lone wolf that we can figure out on ourselves. We can dude, it's just not how humans are made.
No.
Literally.
You have to cross that boundary from inside to outside, get something, and then you have to integrate it, right? You have to be able to integrate it in. Otherwise, I sincerely hope that a group opens up for my dad is like actually willing to join a men's group. And this is the thing about cadence that there needs to be that wave that brings you back. It's like the seasons where you just, self-care can't just be something you do when you have a meltdown.
Exactly.
Right. You can't wait for the next meltdown to be good to yourself. It's something you have to like really invest in, says the man who has a hard time doing that for himself. But
this is some of my a couple buddies in New York that are physical trainers. They say you you either do prehab or you do rehab. You choose, man.
Yeah.
One of those options is a little bit more dramatic than the other usually.
Yeah, 100%. So like, so it sounds like now you kind of need to prehab your team. Like that's the next step for you, is prehabbing your team.
Yeah, it's
building for the future.
It's true.
So dude, we're coming up against our time. I'm really grateful for the conversation. Is there anything else we should talk about that we haven't talked about?
Well, I don't know. I would love to hear. I mean, this conversation thing is your wheelhouse. I would love to hear your thoughts on the cultural conversation, or any advice you would give me on, you see what we're trying to do.
I do.
Yeah. If there's anything that you could, I don't know, share.
I think the invitation you send is invitation being the core thing. Like, I think you've got the invitation. It's getting sharper all the time. And the sort of the second tier in the OS, it's like you have a really good cadence going. And from my perspective, the weekly cadence of the men's groups, the sort of the seasonal cadence of the retreats, and the podcast sort of serves as a thread that keep things going. I think you manage error and repair really well, because like anybody can call you out. Like, not to, like the weekend that I was on when one of the guys had a session with you where he was like in front of everyone, he's like, here's my issue with you. And you welcome it, and you integrate it. It's not like, so I think that's all pretty extraordinary. I think it's going to be an interesting challenge two things. One, last year I had a woman on named Claire Wasserman, who has a group called Ladies Get Paid. It's a wonderful women's community about helping women like get equal pay and empower themselves. And they got sued by a men's group, and they're raising money to like pay for their legal bills. And it's absolutely insane. And I think we in our interview talked about like, what's the right way to integrate men into some of her events in a positive way. And we had like, should men be on the outside listening in? Can men only talk in questions? Can men only speak when spoken to? We talked about like, how can men be part of the conversation? And I think the question of where do women live with men's work, and how could I think that's, gender and the balanced approach. I think a lot of us came away from the men's weekend like being, wow, what's the couples version of this?
Yeah.
How do we have a conversation that's like this, and still safe, but with both genders present, and make it a real healing bridge? And so I think that's a bigger question, but I think at some point, like every gender safe space has to ask, how do we open up the circle and bring in other genders in a way that is appropriate, respectful, and powerful? Like that would be my. And then I'm just like going through the OS. It's like the interface as you go digital. Yeah. How do you maintain the same cadence, the same intimacy? Like it's just not. It's not a given. But I think so. I think it sounds like you're doing everything. To my perspective, I think you guys are just like check, 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 check.
Cool. That's just real fast in response to the women question. So a couple of things. So there's an organization called Women Teach Men, and they are putting on their first event in California in July. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a whole weekend workshop where women are all the teachers and men are all the students.
That's amazing.
And we are running Everyman groups to help men integrate during the weekend. And then the other thing that's cool is we're doing some work with Wanderlust, the yoga community. They're putting on a big thing, a big wellness event this fall, like really big. And I'm gonna be running a men's group. We're gonna be running a co-ed like hour, and then I'm gonna be running my first a men's group for women. And I'm excited just to don't even know what it means yet, but
just a safe space for women to talk about men.
Well, I also just want to show them what we do. That's part of it. Just like, hey, just open the door. Like, hey,
demystify it. Yeah,
this is what we're doing.
Yeah, what do you guys do? Just wrestle and talk about women? I'm like, no, I don't know where you got those ideas from, but that's not what it is.
Oh man,
I think that's really powerful. I think those are really amazing ways of bridging the gap between communities, which is amazing, like absolutely amazing.
Oh man, I wish we had more time. There's other stuff I want to talk about. Can I say one more thing?
Of course you can.
What I'm really excited about, one of many things is how we're starting to open up conversations in particularly tough spaces. So we're about to do our first veteran integration event, which is an expedition where we bring half military veterans, half civilians to have that conversation. We're talking about potentially doing I think you probably heard about it, but potentially a men's group with Palestinian men and Israeli men.
Gills. Totally.
And even potentially doing just a racially focused one, here in America, like maybe partnering with Black Lives Matter or someone, and like talk about like conversations, man, like fires me up.
No, it does, and connecting with people on like a fundamentally human level.
Exactly.
Which is where the potential for healing happens.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, man. This was fun.
Thank you. I look forward to continuing to be in conversation with you, brother.
Yeah. I love the Stillmans. I love all you guys.
Oh man, we need to have you like coach me and my brother and my dad. I'm just going to throw that out there. Nobody else.
Let's talk. I would love to do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, with that, I'll check out. Thank you so much, man.
Yeah. Take care, Daniel.
All right. Talk to you soon.